Okay. Next up, we have John Penrose, Caroline Flint. Please. Good afternoon and welcome.
You're right, what have you done to your back? You're right.
Right, thank you, sorry. Right, good afternoon, and we have an application on energy prices, so over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and just wanted to say, firstly, thank you for giving us a chance to put this in front of you. I think that Caroline and I were delightfully surprised, because we care quite a lot about energy, but when we sent out just one email between the two of us, we've ended up with more than 50 colleagues in total who want to see this aired and saw the text of the motion and said, yep, we want to see this happening. So that was we haven't been going around the lobbies and trying to sign people up with bits of paper or anything like that. It's been a very, very prompt and widespread reaction on, I think, an issue which probably affects every single part of the UK. So it covers, Scotland and Wales and everything else like that. It covers, households right the way across the country as well. We think that, according to Which and others, there are probably at least 16 million people who are being charged very heavily on standard variable tariffs of one kind or another. And this is a long-running issue. This is something which has been addressed by successive governments, or attempted to be addressed by successive governments. The CMA started looking at it back in 2014. They reported in 2016. The Ofgem have been considering their recommendations. There's a great deal of disquiet about some of the recommendations from the CMA, about whether or not they're going to work and how long it's going to take. We're now 18 months further on, and there hasn't been a huge amount of opportunity to debate this properly in Parliament during that, particularly since the CMA's suggestions were published. There have been a couple of debates on smart meters, but that's all, and we now have a consultation, part of the consultation on the industrial strategy, which is, as you will know, due to be completed by mid-April, and that seems to be the opportunity with which to make sure that colleagues' voices are heard and are heard properly. So I suspect probably this 50 plus on a very light touch request expresses a degree of not just broad-based support, but also frustration amongst colleagues right the way across the House, and this is not just Labour colleagues and Conservative. There's an SNP representation in here too, and therefore we would like, if we can, to make sure that the opportunity is grasped before the moment slips away. The consultation finishes in mid-April, obviously with recess on the horizon. That gives us limited opportunity, and we don't want to let it go past before the due date is complete.
Okay, thank you very much. Caroline?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mears. I'm delighted before your committee. It is a first and possibly not the last occasion that I might be here. Just to very briefly add to John's contribution, I know from my own experience, obviously shadowing this brief for 5 years, that there is interest across the House about how fair the big six energy companies treat their customers. And I get no satisfaction, I suppose, in one sense, that from being in the shadow position on this has been confirmed by the Competition Markets Authority, because it was the last coalition government that referred this matter to the CMA, and what they found was 2/3 of customers on standard variable tariff have been paying over the odds. And that's something like 8 billion since 2012. Now, I think the urgency on this is also for the very reason that John outlines, is the government has got this industrial strategy consultation paper. Part of it looks at the energy market and the way it works, but also what we have seen in recent weeks, and even just today, the big six putting up their prices way beyond actually what Ofgem think is fair. And it's only a few weeks ago when I asked the Prime Minister the very question on this, because Empower putting up its prices in a way that even the former chief executive of Empower said was disgusting. So this is very topical. I think it is about a fair energy market and the way it works. But the truth is, no amount of suggesting people switch in of itself is really protecting this customer base, this sticky customer base. Now, the government have actually recognised, and Ofgem, that those on prepayment meters should be protected in some better way beyond switching. And if it's good enough for those people on prepaid meters, what about those other people, often people who aren't computer savvy, stuck on these standard variable tariffs? It's for those reasons, because of the depth of support as well as the numbers, the cross-party nature of this, because of recent price rises beyond what even the regulator says is acceptable, we think this is an opportune time to have a debate in the chamber of the House, because we think it is something affecting so many of our constituents across the UK.
Thank you very much indeed. Questions, please, Bob?
Just a suggestion, really. I understand you've got the concern about the close of the consultation. You'll appreciate, you'll have heard, we have very limited time available for the chamber. And so really the only time we have to allocate potentially is Westminster Hall time. I recognise the urgency of the debate and the level of interest, but I just wonder if we were minded as a committee to allocate you an early Westminster Hall slot, get the view of the government, and then potentially reapply for a chamber slot, which might, because of our timing, be after the consultation closes, so that you can sort of get a view of the government whilst the consultation is going on, and then put an alternative view once the consultation is closed. But our concern, I think, which we'll share in a few minutes, is when we can shoehorn time for such a debate into the time available.
Yeah, I mean, I guess with over 50 colleagues, and we've had a couple more who've signed up this morning, it just feels a bit big for Westminster Hall. And I think obviously much will depend on how the government were to respond to any debate that we had, but the whole point of having a debatable motion is so that if enough of us aren't comfortable with the response when we get it, that we can actually push a division at that point as well. So those will be our sort of two strongest points. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Well, I think I understand exactly what you're saying, Mr. Blackman, on this particular issue. I think the other thing I would say is that if there was an issue of time, I know we've put in for 6 hours, and entirely up to you, that 3 hours in the main chamber, I think is something that we would seek to make sure that our speakers were limited, enforce our own speakers ruling on that sort of thing. But I think part of it is because the government for some time now, not just since the last general election, this has been an issue that has been looked at. It's been a rising problem, and they've always said they would go away. In fact, that's what they said a few weeks ago to me when the Prime Minister answered my question. I raised it at the autumn statement last year with the Chancellor as well. So, given all that, I think the sort of, in some ways, the status and the importance of having it in the main chamber for such an important issue that has, as I said, not been a one-off would be appreciated by us, but is entirely up to the committee, obviously.
Well, no, but hang on, let me be clear. It's your application.
Yeah.
Our job is to facilitate debate, and all I'm looking at is a potential way whereby you can get an early debate in Westminster Hall, but then that doesn't preclude you from then having a debate later in the chamber, if and when time is allocated to this committee to allow a debate in the chamber. Because right now, where we're sitting here, we don't have any time in the chamber guaranteed to allocate at all.
I'm with you. I mean, I guess, and I appreciate the sentiment in which you're asking the question. I do appreciate that entirely. I guess, it would clearly be very much second best given the number of people who signed up so quickly to this and the breadth and the importance of it, and indeed the topicality. I mean, Caroline's already mentioned today, I mean, perhaps while this committee has been sitting, I don't know, but certainly just earlier on today, E.ON has just announced they're putting up their prices by 8.8%, which, considering inflation is under 2, is eye-watering. So it is really genuinely topical at the moment as well.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Caroline, just one question. By the standard variable tariff, is that sometimes known as the default tariff? Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's basically people, and therefore they don't move,
right.
And therefore they can be rolled over to contracts which are worse off year by year. But basically, yes, that's what it is, the standard variable tariff.
Yeah.
It means a standard tariff, but they can basically, the variable bit is they can move you on to something that is even worse than what you've got.
Most people are on it. If you haven't switched, you're on it.
Yeah.
It almost certainly means that you're being charged a lot more than if you did switch, and most of us are on that. And actually the gap between the default tariff, as Caroline just described it, and the switching tariffs has been getting wider and wider and wider, so the rip-off's getting worse.
So it's about 2/3 of bill payers are on the standard variable.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Right, and